I've got 12 movies for you this year, 2 more than normal. And why? Because we're packed this year, baby. Also because I made a list of 10 and then one of them got an Academy Award nomination, and I figured, like, if you're being recognized by the Oscars, then are you really, like, overlooked? But I still didn't want to take it off the list, so I added 2 more to make up for it. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do. If you've already seen either of the previous videos in this series, then you already know this, but here's a quick rundown just in case you're new here. Like you. Thanks for coming by. Be sure to check out that Pokemon trivia video on the way out afterward. This is Movies You May Have Missed 2024, an annual series where I talk about films that came out this year that I don't think got enough attention. Myumhum is not a top 10 list. I'm not even promising that every movie on this list is good. But every movie on this list is interesting. We're here to celebrate big swings, even if they don't hit. Now, some of these might be small movies that you haven't heard of, some might be big movies that I just don't think enough people have checked out. I'm just here trying to help make sure that every movie gets the chance to find its audience. Also, some of these are going to be simple and cute, but others might be really challenging. So if you have any content concerns, I highly recommend using Does the Dog Die or a similar website before you seek out any of these movies for yourself. And finally, I'll try not to give any major spoilers, but sometimes I will share moments that I like to help illustrate why I think a movie is good or interesting. However, your mileage may vary if you are particularly spoiler phobic, so just keep that in mind. Alright, let's rock and roll.
You sell drugs. You sell them for the radical Republicans against drugs.
Bit off brand, is it not?
Kneecap! It seems like there's a sea of nearly interchangeable music biopics, but that's what makes it all the more exciting when one stands out, and wow, does Kneecap stand out. It's not just recounting the events of a band coming together, it's a radical statement about the importance of keeping the Irish language alive. This is a fictionalized version of their origin story, where the band members all play themselves. Kneecap, the real-life hip-hop group, perform with Irish lyrics, and often with explicitly Irish Republican themes. And this is about how their art has helped them spread their message of a reunified Ireland, which we're already behind, according to Star Trek.
The Irish unification of 2024.
It feels rare to see a movie be this upfront and nakedly political. The movie basically looks you right in the eye and says, Irish reunification is good, and keeping the Irish language alive is necessary. The characters straight up say Brits out at one point, and they do this all while laying down tracks that are so good they get stuck in my head, and I don't even speak the language they're performing in. Which I guess is actually Kneecap's entire MO. Be so unquestionably cool that people can't not learn Irish.
Harfour, ik torch over Wallace ne
Gala Walla Kugla and Yek.
Sing a Lord a Haya.
Or
Rap is far or don't. Cad foon.
Yes, Trinket, I love you too. You're a very sweet girl. Do you want to sit on my lap? You want to sit on my lap while we record? Okay. Alright, I'm going to be recording the rest of this video with a cat on my lap. You might end up hearing her purring on the audio. She's a very happy girl and she purrs a lot.
We're just in different places as people, you know? She thinks I'm stuck.
You're too young to be stuck.
I don't feel young.
Well, I don't feel old.
Thelma. June Squibb is a national treasure. But have you ever thought that she should lead an action movie? Of course you have. Literally everyone has thought that. But someone finally came along and actually did it. After Thelma falls victim to a phishing scam, she goes on a personal rampage tracking down the scammers to get her money back. And she teams up with her friend Ben, played by fellow national treasure Richard Roundtree in his final role. And the two of them undertake a genuinely exciting mission as they try to get to the scammers' headquarters, all while outwitting Thelma's concerned family, who are trying to get her to come back home. I love that the movie hinges on the fact that she has trouble with technology, while also showing that she has completely mastered the technology that she uses for accessibility. And you bet your ass they find ways to use those exact same accessibility aids as spy gear. The whole movie walks a pretty nuanced line that acknowledges Thelma needs to learn she can't do everything on her own, but that she still deserves to be treated as an independent person. That people constantly assuming she can't do anything is incredibly patronizing, even if their intentions are good. Her family spend the entire movie trying to find her, but they assume that she just wandered off. It never seems to occur to them that she may have gone somewhere on purpose. They just don't trust her to be alone. And yeah, she does need help sometimes, but she also needs respect.
What?
I didn't say anything.
Left 2 millimeters.
What?
Head left 2 millimeters. Head left 2 millimeters!
Stop motion. Before I tell you about stop motion, I want to tell you a different story. About David W. Allen. Allen was a special effects artist and stop-motion animator who wanted to make a movie called The Primevals. The Primevals was supposed to be a globe-trotting adventure epic that would blend live-action footage with stop-motion characters. And unfortunately, a project this big called for a lot of money that Allen didn't have, both for on-location shooting and for the massive amount of stop-motion work necessary to bring it to life. During that time, Allen would work on several projects you've probably heard of. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Ghostbusters 2, Willow, Q, the Winged Serpent. But he was always trying to get his big adventure movie off the ground. And finally, after 20 years of trying to secure funding, The Primevals was able to start shooting in 1994 with the studio Full Moon Entertainment. However, Full Moon broke with longtime distribution partner Paramount, and the project ran into financial difficulties once again. And even though Allen managed to finish principal photography, there wasn't any money for post-production now. And how on earth are you supposed to make a film that's dependent on stop-motion animation when you don't have any money for stop-motion animation? Well, David Allen wasn't going to let that stop him. He'd animate the whole thing himself if he had to. So that's pretty much what he did. Allen would work on the animation whenever he could find the time, just getting closer and closer to finishing the film, finishing it quite literally by hand. Unfortunately, The Primevals could never see the light of day. In 1999, David Allen passed away due to cancer, leaving his big adventure epic unfinished. However, all of Allen's storyboards, puppets, and equipment were left with his friend and colleague Chris Endicott, and in 2018, Charles Band, the founder of Full Moon, launched an Indiegogo campaign to finish the movie that brought in a little over $40,000. They needed $175,000, but this movie was no stranger to financial difficulty, and it was no stranger to elbow grease. Over the next 5 years, a dedicated team of animators, many of whom were personal friends of Allen's, worked to finish the film with the scarce amount of money they had raised, and in 2024, it finally came out. Thanks to a lot of dedicated, passionate work, you can now see The Primevals 25 years after the death of its director. I wanted to tell you this story because it really highlights how much effort and energy and passion goes into animating. How it's so time-consuming, but to imbue life into something lifeless, it's worth that time. It has to be worth that time. Also, if you haven't seen The Primevals, consider this spot to be a secret hidden bonus recommendation. We talk a lot about how you need to put yourself into your art, but what does that actually mean? If animation is the act of bringing life to the lifeless, how far can you actually take that? I mean, what does it mean to bring life to something? Why are we so interested in bringing life to inanimate objects anyway? Why do we even want to do that in the first place? Do we want to feel like we have control over life and death? Do we want to create a world that we have power over, or do we just want to share a piece of ourselves with others? In stop motion, Ailing Franciosi plays Ella, the daughter of a legendary stop-motion animator. However, her mother has developed very bad arthritis and can no longer reliably move her models. As a result, Ella has taken to operating as her mother's hands, despite her mother being an exceptionally demanding perfectionist with abusive methods of getting Ella to follow her instructions. And after her mother falls into a coma, Ella tries to complete the project without her, only to decide that she should instead take this opportunity to make her own film. And it's worth pointing out that stop-motion animation is usually a two-word term, but the title of this movie is Stop Motion. It forces you to think about what stop motion actually means. And how much are we moving forward on our own? How much of the creative process is us just trying to live up to people who aren't even around anymore? I also just really appreciate the integration of stop motion puppetry along with the live action footage. I'd love to see more films do this, and really, if anyone has any recently released live action stop motion hybrid films other than the 2 that I've mentioned here, please let me know in the comments because I really want to hear about them. Interestingly, this movie sets up a very specific twist, and for a second I felt really smart, like, I know where this is going. I've seen enough of the Twilight Zone to catch on as soon as you set this up. Then the movie just casually reveals the twist like it's no big deal, like they knew you already figured it out, and that's super cool. Like, we don't have to stop and make a big deal out of this because you trusted me to have figured it out by now. And it was a nice reminder that movies are peers that work with you to have a conversation, not work against you in some kind of competition to prove who's smarter. And ultimately, that's why I wanted to spotlight this movie here. It's an incredibly deep movie, but it's also surprisingly straightforward. Now, this is a horror film, and at times it veers into body horror, so if that's not your deal, I'm warning you now. I will say, though, that if it helps, you can imagine she works at Aardman and is running from a giant Wallace. Jeez!
I'm not going to call a search for Julie. She's probably out scissoring someone's wife.
I beg your pardon?
Look, to keep your panties out of a twist, I do a call to keep an eye out for her. If she's still AWOL in a couple of days, you can file a missing person thingy.
Carnage for Christmas. What a great year this has been for queer features. I saw the TV Glow, The People's Joker, Drive Away Dolls, Love Lies Bleeding, National Anthem, Queer. I mean, if you haven't seen any of those, then you can just consider that 6 bonus recommendations. Though, full disclosure, I haven't seen these last 2 myself yet, so I can't speak for them, but I have seen these 4, and they come highly recommended. Also, Sonic 3, Robotnik is pansexual now. But right now I want to spotlight Carnage for Christmas in particular. Lola is a true crime podcaster who returns to her childhood home for the holidays only to discover that an old town legend, the Toy Maker, has come back and is killing people. That's a solid enough setup already, but what really helps this movie stand out is that it's built around a very relatable trans experience. Going back to the small town where you grew up pre-transition and just bracing yourself for how everyone that you knew in high school is going to behave when they see you. I also grew up in a small town in a very conservative area, and I'd been recently having very, very similar conversations with an old friend of mine. Coming back after transitioning can be such an awkward and even scary event. You're surrounded by people who know you, but who don't know who you've become. And when they dead name or misgender you, you're caught trying to work out if you should correct them. Like, maybe they'll take it well, but maybe they won't. Ideally, you'll say, "Hi, it's nice to see you again. Actually, my name and pronouns are different now." And then they'll respond with, "Oh, I'm sorry. Congratulations. Here's a crisp $100 bill as penance." But you know that best case scenario, they'll most likely look at you a little weird, go, oh, okay, and then definitely go back to dead naming you after you leave. Equally possible, though, is that your morning gets upended by having to answer a bunch of very personal questions that you are not really in the mood to field right now. Small towns often pride themselves on how polite the people who live there are, but that polite behavior doesn't necessarily guarantee genuine kindness. You end up having to take a lot on the chin just because you're frequently trying to avoid causing a scene. And at times, Carnage for Christmas feels like a feature-length adaptation of that feeling. A feeling that a lot of cis people could really stand to familiarize themselves with. Also, there's some pretty sick murders by a killer wearing a Santa costume. My favorite is the one at the gas station. It's not a particularly flashy kill, but it's funny and it's effective in its simplicity. This is the first movie I've seen from Alice Mayo McKay, but I really like her style and her commitment to unique visual storytelling. She's got 4 other trans horror features currently on Shudder and AMC Plus that you can see right now, and I'm looking forward to checking those out. So keep an eye on Alice Mayo McKay's work. I'm excited to see what she does next. Oh, and this has nothing to do with the film, but I also want to say that I love Lola's little pink sleeves. I like them a lot, and I want them.
Oh, you just need me to go break in and check on something.
Bitch, do you know who you're fucking talking to?
Oh. Oh. Rah. 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 Rah.
Sasquatch Sunset. This may be the most beautiful film to ever feature an extended sequence where actors in gorilla costumes piss and shit all over a road. We follow a group of Sasquatches, male, female, child, and alpha male, the 4 genders, through a year of their lives. And it portrays the Sasquatches not as a mysterious, unknowable cryptid, but rather as a critically endangered species that's just like any other wild animal. The vibe here is decidedly not unmasking Bigfoot, the monster of the woods, and much more, hey, we discovered a small group of lowland gorillas that live here in America and we just followed them around with cameras for a year. The really interesting thing here is just how matter-of-factly everything is portrayed. They forage for food, they try to fend off predators, they mate. It's often gross, but that's because nature is gross. It's often violent, but that's because nature is violent. It's often sexual, just because that's nature. I mentioned the scene where they piss and shit all over the road earlier, and that's actually a pretty solid microcosm for the entire film. It's darkly funny, being both an incredibly absurd image, but also draped in sadness as you realize that this is the only way they know how to mark their territory, and they're doing it against a world that simply will not recognize it. That leaving your scent might work to ward off other wildlife, but you cannot piss and shit a road away. Humanity has marked their territory, and they're only going to keep encroaching. And then you realize there's a reason that the title of the movie is Sasquatch Sunset.
And I have a lot of ideas for toys. Toys these days are wonderful, but they are a little bit too preoccupied with fun.
Problemista. Okay, I will admit to not being totally familiar with the work of Julio Torres, but I will start rectifying that now. Los Espookies looks very fun. Also, I learned while putting this together that he wrote Saturday Night Live's Wells for Boys, which was a sketch that always resonated with me for some reason.
Some kids like to play, others just sort of wait for adulthood.
So what is he putting in there?
A secret.
Learning that the person who wrote that sketch was the main creative voice behind this movie really tracks. You can see a lot of the same humor here. Torres plays Alejandro, an aspiring toy designer who has moved from El Salvador to New York, hoping to start working for Hasbro. However, he's been unable to find work, and now he has 30 days before his visa expires. He takes up work as an assistant for an eccentric art critic played by Tilda Swinton. The movie is surprisingly informative. It dedicates a lot of time to laying out a series of very specific grievances with banks and the United States' immigration system. And as a result, one of the movie's best jokes is a legal disclaimer at the end of the credits. Alejandro's various struggles are represented through fantastical scenes that represent the conversations he is having or the issues he is facing, and some of these are hauntingly effective at communicating how he feels. And oh my god, Elizabeth as a character is so well realized. I have met more than a few people exactly like her, and Tilda Swinton absolutely nails this role.
You tell him.
I'm vegan.
He's allergic.
To goat cheese or
Everything.
Oh, I apologize. We'll refund the salad.
Well, that's not what we want.
Okay. I just don't know what else I could do. I can't go back
Fetch
in
somebody
time.
else who would say
I'm
something
sorry.
different.
I'll get my supervisor.
Oh, you're going to hold us hostage now?
Okay, so get my supervisor or don't. Those are the choices. I either get him or I don't get him.
You can chart our incredible journey around the globe. West Africa, South Africa, India, Indonesia, Australia, Japan.
Why?
Why? What do you mean, why?
Ah!
Kensuke's Kingdom. I don't know how often you check the shorts feed, but I do another series over there called This Week at the Movies. Every week I have to come up with 5 movies that are releasing. One of the things that I like about doing that series is that it forces me to find movies that I wouldn't know about otherwise. Case in point, I would have never learned about Kensuke's Kingdom if I wasn't actively looking up movie releases. It was made by Lupus Films, a studio that I had never heard of before, but they are doing some beautiful work. I mean, look at this. They made a sequel to The Snowman. I love The Snowman. Why didn't I hear about this? Kensuke's Kingdom follows Michael, a boy who's sailing around the world with his family until he and his dog are swept overboard in a bad storm and wash up on a small island in the Pacific Ocean. They survive thanks to help from Kensuke, an old man who only speaks Japanese. This is one of those movies where I feel like the reason to watch it is already up on screen. It's very pretty, but it also tells a very effective story. I'll admit, I'm kind of a sucker for movies where 2 characters can't speak the same language and they have to find a new way to communicate. It is nearly always going to form an interesting story, and I love that they never learn the same language here. Kensuke only speaks Japanese, and Michael only speaks English throughout the entire film. But it doesn't matter. Michael learns about how to respect nature, how to care for himself, how to protect the island, and it doesn't matter that Kensuke can only teach him this stuff through body language and tone. As a result, the characters' movements and decisions are so important to making the story work. It's the kind of thing that feels effortless when done right, but takes an obscene amount of effort to do, and they nail it. There is so much care into every little decision that every character makes, even though most of the characters in this movie are nonverbal animals. This movie made me care more about a beetle that is in 2 shots than most movies can get me to care about their main character.
No, stop.
Is your mommy and daddy home? Oh, don't be afraid. I'm not gonna kill you or nothing. I just want to talk to your folks.
Abruptio. Yes! Puppets! That's the first bullet point in my notes. It's just the word puppets in all caps with an exclamation point. Our main character here is Les Hackle, voiced by Spike/Piccolo James Marsters. And one day he discovers that a bomb has been planted in the back of his neck, and if he wants to stay alive, he'll have to follow the instructions given to him by a mysterious entity that wants him to steal, kill, and basically do a bunch of horrible things against his will. You know, like some kind of puppet master. Now, I don't think that movies ever really have to justify their style. Like, sometimes something can just be an interesting choice for the sake of it being an interesting choice. Like that Robbie Williams biopic where he's a chimp. The marketing goes out of its way to tell you that they did that to better push the feeling of being an outsider because he always felt a little less evolved than other people. But honestly, if they had said, well, we made Robbie Williams a chimp in this movie because we thought it'd be a fun choice, my response would have been like, cool, I love that. I don't know, it's just okay to be weird sometimes, you know? Being weird is fun. That being said, I do like how this movie uses puppetry to reinforce its themes. Of course Lester is a puppet, or at least he sees himself as one. As far as he's concerned, he isn't in control of his actions, and he needs to learn that cutting those strings is his responsibility. But that's tough because he finds comfort in being pulled around. Les finds comfort in his alcoholism, in his terrible job, in his girlfriend who doesn't love him. There's something nice about the familiar, even when the familiar is terrible. I like that the puppets here are kinda ugly. Every character seems to be just a little too realistic. They don't move and act exactly like cartoons, but they aren't quite human beings either. They're brought to life by a combination of puppetry and post-production augmentation to provide blinking eyes and moving lips. Sometimes the augmentation is better than others, but the overall effect is this unsettling world where it feels uncomfortable to even just exist. I've seen a lot of things fall into the uncanny valley, but I don't think I've ever seen something dive in head first in an attempt to weaponize it before. Lester has a permanent vacant look on his face that really helps define him as a thoroughly empty person. Like, he's literally built in a way that his face physically cannot smile. It actually feels like that sad Muppet who asks Scrooge for more time in his loan at the beginning of the Muppet Christmas Carol. But Les is so human that it's horrifyingly sad. You know, instead of it being cartoon funny sad. I understand that this movie has been in production for about a decade now, and it's always good to see a passion project really come together, especially one this weird. It's also worth mentioning that this movie is now the final film to feature a performance by Sid Haig, who has a great list of memorable roles. Be aware this movie can be very intense at times, and some of these scenes would probably feel a little too intense if they were done with live actors instead of puppets, so keep that in mind if you check this one out.
My name is Les Hackle, and I have a bomb in my neck. Just like everyone else.
Clarence, I thought I told you. Good to see you too, brother. What do you need? Well, truthfully, I thought I might become the 13th apostle.
The Book of Clarence. Lakeith Stanfield plays a con man messiah. That should be enough of a pitch right there. Are you telling me you don't want to watch a movie where Lakeith Stanfield plays a con man messiah? We follow Clarence, a constant screw-up who everyone says will never amount to anything. This is especially stinging because he's held in comparison to his twin brother, the Apostle Thomas, who Clarence deeply resents for leaving their family to become a disciple. In an attempt to stave off a loan shark, Clarence tries to join the Apostles, ultimately deciding that he should just become the new Messiah. And at its core, it's a story about a man who pretends to be the Messiah so hard that he starts actually becoming a better person. Now, I don't know if it all comes together as well as it should, could, or wants to, but this movie is absolutely swinging for the fences, and Myung-hum is a pro swing for the fences series. I don't think I've ever seen a movie try to both satirize something and be the thing it is satirizing in completely equal measure. You can really see the inspiration from classic biblical epic cinema. This is the kind of movie that just feels big, but here's why I like it. It feels big while also feeling really loose. It's this sweeping story with beautiful vistas, elaborate costuming, and very impressive sets, all told through incredibly creative cinematography. But it's not so self-serious that they won't make an anachronistic joke or have a bit where John the Baptist tries to drown the main character. That looseness also extends to the plot, for better and for worse. There are some stretches where you're just kinda hanging out with the characters. That being said, sometimes I like just hanging out with characters. And check out the sick dance scene. This dance scene just kinda happens, and it rules. I'm realizing now that I said the same thing about the dance scene from Fresh in my 2022 video. I think I might just really like it when movies stop and the characters just dance for a little bit. And you know what? I'm correct. This is the right way to enjoy movies. How do you make a good movie? Easy. 1, more dance scenes. 2, more puppets. 3, characters that can't talk to each other and have to communicate some other way. 4, a crisp $100 bill. It's not that hard, people! But not only is that one dance scene good, the music in general is good. The director, James Samuel, is also the film's composer, and that shows. He said that putting together the visuals and the soundtrack were a journey where one depended on the other, and yeah, I can see it. The visuals and the soundtrack inform each other and synthesize together in a way that feels wholly unique to this film. Also, the music is very, very good. And the list of people who contributed to the soundtrack here is just packed full of impressive names. The Book of Clarence is full of ideas, sometimes to a point where it feels like it's trying to fit a little too much into one movie, but ultimately, the experience of watching it is worth it.
So you are his papa?
No.
This guy.
I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm just trying to figure it out.
The Lord is.
Okay.
I was minding my own virgin business, just being a virgin. And an angel called Gabriel came upon me.
Ça se développe. Tu vas voir, tu vas finir par aimer ça. J'ai pas besoin de tuer du monde pour savoir que j'aimerais pas ça. T'es-tu peut-être pas Sacha, mais t'es manges pareil.
Humanist Vampire seeking consenting suicidal person. You've probably already gathered what this movie is about from the title, but just because you can guess how this movie is going to unfold, that doesn't mean that the journey isn't still really good. The key here is how well it walks that tonal tightrope that's baked into its premise. See, this is a funny movie. It is silly and jokey, and it knows that its whole deal is kind of ridiculous. That being said, every time that they discuss the topic of self-harm, the movie slows down and it treats the topic with the gravity it deserves. Its heart lives firmly in genuine empathy. That's tough to pull off, but when it works, it really works, and here is a movie where it works. I love that this movie feels like it was made for vampires. Like, it feels like a vampire directed a movie for a vampire audience about what it's like to be a young outcast in vampire society, and somehow that movie accidentally fell into our human world, and now we get to watch it. The rules and world building here are basically just assumed. There's a scene where Sasha briefly explains to Paul that vampires age slower than humans, but that's really all they bother spelling out. Otherwise, you're just dropped into a world with vampire dentists and vampire child psychologists, and the movie figures that you just already know about these things. One of my favorite touches is that every vampire household has these big glass jugs with straws in them. They never explain what they're for, or even show them being used. They're just present, like a coffee machine or a toaster, and everyone treats them as normal. I figure these are somehow involved in draining their victims or making the blood bags or something, but that's just my best guess. Or maybe they're just a Canadian thing. I don't know. I've never been to Quebec. For all I know, you guys are doing all kinds of crazy stuff up there with your big old jugs. And oh, look, a little dance sequence. I don't care if I'm becoming predictable. I like a little dance sequence. I will always like a little dance sequence. They make me smile.
Tu vas s'en prendre? Mon fils, c'est pas un meurtrier.
Ouais, à part moi-même, je serai jamais personne.
To spoil the plot for you, they become best friends, they fall in love through that deep bond, and their relationship implodes when he finds out he's not the only man she's ever been with. Rom-com gold.
Chasing Amy. Remember earlier in this video when I gave you 7 recommendations for queer films? Well, here's an 8th. That's right, this year was so gay that I still have room to shout out one more. Nearly everyone I know has a complicated relationship with the movie Chasing Amy, myself included. If you want my quick thoughts, I think it's a very profound movie about biphobia that definitely was not intended to be about biphobia. For what it's worth, I like it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have my own set of hang-ups surrounding it. And Chasing Amy does a really good job at parsing out the myriad of complications that surround the movie. We follow Sav Rogers, who is both the director and the primary subject of this movie. He has his own relationship with Chasing Amy. When he was a kid, he used to watch it every single day. He credits it with having kept him alive pre-transition. It's a very honest documentary, and shows a lot of vulnerability from Sav. His relationship with Chasing Amy, his relationship with his fiancée, his relationship with his mom, and ultimately his relationship with this movie, the one he is making and that you are watching. Sav publicly comes out relatively early on in the film and undergoes some very important transition milestones over the course of the movie. It isn't directly about his transition, but it is present, and it's part of a story about his growth as a person. I mean, he even gets married over the course of the movie. Chasing Amy has been involved in his puberty, his transition, and now his marriage. And those are 3 really important turning points in a person's life. And you really feel for Sav and Riley as a couple. Every time that Riley is on screen, you can just tell that the person making this movie is absolutely in love with her. You can practically feel Sav off camera gesturing at her and going like, "This is my wife. Can you believe it? I'm so lucky." And it's very, very sweet. The film also has a lot of vulnerability from Kevin Smith, the director of Chasing Amy, who shows up for quite a bit of this movie, actually. I was surprised at how big of a role he has in this film. He's not just an off-screen presence, he's a major participant. And he's pretty honest about how he needed to grow and how Chasing Amy probably wasn't his story to tell. The big moment here, though, is the interview with Joey Lauren Adams, who starred in Chasing Amy, and I mean, dang, she has some powerful things to say. She shows up and she's like, I don't want to have the same Chasing Amy interview that I've already had 100 times before. And Sav is like, good, because neither do I. And they don't. Wow. That's actually all I'm going to say. Watch the movie and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Do you find the film to be authentic to the LGBTQ community?
I find it authentic to the straight dude who falls for a queer woman community.
Flow. All right, here's my cheat for this year. The movie that's literally up for an Academy Award. I still want to talk about it because it's genuinely really good, and I don't think enough people have seen it. It takes place in a post-human world, and a cat who has always enjoyed living his life alone suddenly loses his home to a flood and has to team up with a capybara, a lemur, a Labrador, and a secretary bird on a derelict boat in search for a new home. There are some genuinely scary scenes in this movie. They are visceral in some parts too. Like, I knew this cat was going to survive until the end of the movie. And I will let you know that now, that yes, the cat does, in fact, live. But there are some scenes, one of which is only like 10 minutes in, where I spent the entire time rocking back and forth in the theater, just worrying, like, is this cat gonna be okay? Oh my god. Actually, come to think of it, if I had a nickel for every movie that came out this year that had an emphasis on nonverbal communication and featured animals dealing with the dangers of water, I'd have 3 nickels, which is 1 more than this meme usually calls for. One of the most impressive things about this movie is that it was rendered entirely in Blender, an open source software that you can download right now for free, and you can start rendering 3D models. And the animation in this movie is insanely impressive. I'm not going to lie to you, it isn't perfect. For example, this is a movie that's largely about water, yet nothing ever really seems to get wet. But the fundamentals here are incredibly strong. This is a movie with absolutely no dialogue, and all of the characters are well defined, and their intentions are crystal clear. I can tell you that this is the coolest capybara in the world. This secretary bird was completely justified, and fuck these dogs. Really, I do not say this lightly, but these are bad dogs. This is a movie where a cat started catching fish, and I cried because I was proud of him. So yeah, the animation may not be perfect, but it is beautiful, and it's affecting everywhere that it needs to be. And the fact that this was made on Blender is a testament to how important accessibility to artistic tools is. I got so fired up after watching this movie that I got back into Blender. Here's my donut. I made this. It's not perfect, but it's mine. If you've ever wanted to get into 3D modeling, this is a fantastic time to do so. I'll put a link in the description for where you can download Blender, and this is absolutely an invitation for you to show me things that you make on it. Here's my blue sky. I would love to see your Blender art. Yes, even if it's just your results from the Blender Guru donut tutorial, send it my way. It makes me so happy to see people start learning new ways to express themselves. And just please never forget that while good tools are incredibly important, good art is always fundamentally the result of good artists who care. But that's only my list. Every year, hundreds of films get released, and not nearly enough of them get the attention they deserve. So if you have a recommendation or two for movies that came out this year, please share them in the comments below. I would really like to get more recommendations. I always welcome them. Now I'd like to take a brief moment to speak directly to my mom. If you're not my mom, please skip directly to this time code, okay? I'm trusting you to do this. Only my mom is allowed to watch this next part. All right, I'll see you there. Okay, Mom, I know you watch these, so here's a second list of personal recommendations just for you. I think the ones you would like most are Kensuke's Kingdom, Thelma, Flow, and I think you'd probably like Humanist Vampire. Welcome back, everybody who isn't my mom. Thanks for joining me again this year. It genuinely means a lot to me. Recently we were displaced due to the wildfires, and working on this video was a very helpful way to keep an anchor during a very uncertain time. If you like what I do here, please like and subscribe, and if you want to see Mumhums from previous years, I have a playlist for you right here. Thanks again. Bye.